Hi everyone, my name is Bruno from BSA Law and Intergen. Now all of you are here today because you embarked on a special journey with Andrew Walker and Sapin. Now what is this journey? It's wealth creation, right? The problem with wealth creation in isolation is that people don't look at wealth preservation. Now, having taken these steps and committing to Andrew and Sapin, you'll see that one of the most important things that you're going to learn is that planning is key. It is always key. Trying to fix a bad situation later is costly and stresses you, it drains you mentally, and obviously from a financial perspective is sometimes unaffordable, especially if you find yourself some good investments, because the better the investment, the harder and more expensive you're going to find it is to transfer it across into structures that then make sense. So this conversation is around what structure is important for you right now. What adds value to your life? And obviously there's a bunch of different factors that one needs to consider when making this decision. Now, before we start getting into those factors, I just want to explain to you the history behind structuring and how I got involved with it, right? Now, I dealt a lot with litigation. It was problem solving. It was identifying problems and trying to find a way of resolving them after the fact. This is when people were already fighting, when issues had already happened, right? And many times this involved suing persons or companies going after assets that they owned, and often finding that this was easier than what one would have thought, simply because the assets were visible. They were right there. They were ripe for the taking. People had not structured their businesses. And you as a property investor are running a business. People had not structured their businesses with this sort of thing in mind. I then moved over into more commercial work, where I still did a lot of litigation, but I focused on commercial. And why is that? Right? I found that sometimes it's not about identifying the problem after it happened and finding a solution. Sometimes it's actually about identifying the problem before it happens and coming up with the solution right there to be able to govern, be it the relationship between parties, be it a supplier or a business partner, wherever it might be. And this, unfortunately, is where I found businesses were lacking. It was that planning ahead. It was the ability to be able to foresee problems and find solutions. And I often tell clients, and Andrew will say the exact same thing, don't commit to a deal that doesn't make sense. Don't fall in love or get emotionally attached to a deal simply because you found one aspect of it is attractive when the reality is it doesn't make sense. And the same applies to relationships. The same applies to contracts, supplies, any business relationship, commercial relationship that you find yourself in, right? And why this is important to remember is because having a deal fail before it even started is better than finding yourself in a position many, many years later where you realize that the deal is doomed for failure because the right conversations weren't had ahead of time. Now, this takes me to the next part of the conversation, which is commercial feasibility. What's commercial feasibility? Now, the mindset of many individuals and property investors is that as soon as they find legal as a label, they immediately switch off. It's like the individual saying, I was never good at maths. And as soon as those words come out of your mouth, guess what? You're not going to be good at maths. You're not going to be able to do even the simplest sums because you've already spoken negatively about that idea. Now, same thing applies to legal. As soon as there's legal, I'm not good at legal, right? The problem is, let's be fair, attorneys are professionals. There is a cost associated with it. And there are certain things that is not exclusive to an attorney. Now, the difference between me and many other attorneys is because I'm commercially orientated, I also focus very much on the business itself as opposed to simply the legals, right? So approaching me to brainstorm That's a good idea. It's not a bad idea at all if you're entering into a business venture. With other attorneys, I would normally suggest work out the commercials before approaching them because they simply want to turn commercials into legal. Now, although I can assist with commercials and I can assist with turning commercials into legal, it is incumbent on you to think about the commercials first. When you have the conversation, be it with somebody you're buying a property from or a business partner, you want to be able to at least speak to the commercial rationale and don't worry about the legals. We can always deal with that later. When you approach me, I want to hear about the commercial rationale. And once I know about the commercial rationale, I'm going to stress test it. And by stress testing, what I mean is I'm going to throw obstacles in the way. And if the commercial reasoning survives those obstacles, you got yourself a potential deal. If not, why waste money drafting contracts when the deal is unlikely to go through, right? Now, what do we look at when we speak about structuring in the legal and tax and commercial landscape? There's asset protection, there's tax efficiency, and there's financing optimization. Now, I'm going to go into detail on all of these, but just as a quick brief introduction, asset protection is exactly what it means. You want to protect your assets. You want to protect your business. You want to protect yourself, right? That is protection at its best. And that's what we're going to go into. Tax efficiency. I mean, need I say more? Who wants to pay more money to SARS than they really have to? Financing optimization is the one sometimes where people don't have an understanding of. The financing optimization is firstly the ability of getting money from a bank or a financial institution by way of a loan, right? Can even be a private individual that's going to give you money as a loan. But there's also another side to it, and that is getting money from a capital contribution, maybe by another shareholder or a future shareholder or a future business partner. Now remember, both of these are financing optimization. The question really is it going to be a debt or is it going to be a capital contribution? We'll explore all of this later. I again have to emphasize that if you're going to do this and undertake this journey, please plan ahead. Listen to these videos and realize that unfortunately, if you're going to get a trust, as an example, ideally you'd want to do it sooner rather than later. Now, obviously there's no cookie cutter approach. Maybe your scenarios or your circumstances don't merit a trust, don't merit the use of a company, whatever it might be, but consider them. Consider what your scenarios are, because if you tick all those boxes, and you undertake this journey and you do not structure correctly, unfortunately, you're going to be at risk.